The noise problem. There is a strange comfort in noise. Talking fills space, explaining fills time. Sharing plans can feel like movement, even when nothing has actually moved. Most days, the noise does not arrive as chaos. It arrives politely. It sounds like updates, opinions, reactions, and commentary. It sounds like checking in, staying visible, and keeping people informed. It sounds useful, responsible even. And yet, something subtle happens when noise becomes the default. The space where action usually grows starts to shrink. You might notice this first as a mild restlessness, a sense of being busy without feeling fulfilled. The day ends and you are tired, but the important thing did not move forward. Not because you avoided it, but because it never quite had a quiet moment to begin. Noise competes with depth, not aggressively, gently, constantly. It pulls attention into the present moment, again and again, until there is no uninterrupted stretch left to sink into anything meaningful. Every thought is slightly interrupted, every effort slightly fragmented. Progress becomes shallow, not because of laziness, but because the environment never allows focus to settle. Talking about what you will do can feel safer than doing it. Words are light. They can be adjusted, softened, or taken back. Action is heavier. Once done, it leaves a mark. It commits you to reality. Noise gives you the illusion of forward motion without requiring commitment. And the mind often prefers illusions that feel productive over silence that demands effort. Silence, after all, does not offer applause. It does not confirm that you are on the right path. It does not respond when you ask for reassurance. Silence simply waits. This waiting can feel uncomfortable at first. Without constant input, your thoughts grow louder. Doubt surfaces. Boredom appears. The urge to check something, say something, or announce something creeps in. That urge is worth noticing. Often, the need to speak comes not from clarity, but from uncertainty. Talking becomes a way to stabilize identity, to remind yourself and others that you are still in motion, still relevant, still trying. But trying is not the same as doing. Noise creates a public version of progress. Silence creates a private one. And private progress, while slower to show, tends to be sturdier. Think about how often plans dissolve after being announced too early. Something about saying it out loud releases the tension that would have fueled action. The mind registers completion where none has occurred. The reward arrives before the work. Silence delays that reward, and that delay matters. In quiet, effort has nowhere to hide. You either sit with the work or you do not. There is no performance to distract from the absence of results. No audience to applaud intention. This can feel exposing, but it is also honest. Noise is generous with validation. Silence is stingy. It offers satisfaction only after something has actually been built. The modern world, of course, does not encourage silence. It encourages visibility. Being seen doing something often counts as doing it. Updates become currency. Reaction becomes participation. In that environment, choosing quiet action can feel almost rebellious. Like stepping off a moving walkway while everyone else keeps riding it. You are still moving, just under your own power. The problem is not that talking is bad. Words matter. Sharing has its place. Collaboration requires communication. Reflection requires language. The problem appears when talking replaces doing, when explanation becomes a substitute for execution, when planning becomes an endless loop that never quite touches reality. Noise becomes a buffer, a way to stay close to action without entering it. Silence removes that buffer. In silence, time feels different. Minutes stretch. Distractions lose their urgency. The task in front of you grows clearer, not because it is easy, but because there is nothing else competing for attention. This clarity can feel heavy. Without noise, there is no excuse not to begin. The mind cannot blame interruption. It must face resistance directly. And resistance, when faced quietly, often turns out to be smaller than expected. There is also a humility in silence. When you stop narrating your efforts, you stop shaping how they are perceived. You allow the outcome to speak instead of the intention. This shift can feel risky. What if the outcome is not impressive? What if it takes longer than expected? What if no one notices? These questions are uncomfortable, but they are also grounding. They pull you back into reality, where real progress happens without guarantees. Noise thrives on certainty. Silence accepts uncertainty and works anyway. You might notice that some of the most capable people speak less about what they are doing, not because they are secretive, but because their energy is invested elsewhere. Their attention is inward, not outward. They are not managing perception. They are managing effort. This inward orientation is increasingly rare. And because it is rare, it is powerful. Silence protects early progress. It shields fragile ideas from premature judgment. It allows rough drafts to stay rough until they are ready. Noise exposes everything too soon. It invites opinions before structure exists. It demands justification before understanding has formed. Silence gives you permission to be incomplete. There is a quiet confidence that grows when you stop explaining yourself. Not the loud kind that announces achievement, but the steady kind that comes from knowing you are moving, even when no one is watching. That confidence is built privately, one quiet session at a time. The noise problem is not external only. It lives inside the mind as well. The constant internal commentary, the rehearsed explanations, the imagined reactions of others. Silence calms that inner narration too. It shortens the distance between intention and action. Instead of thinking about the work, you find yourself inside it. This is where momentum begins. Not with motivation, but with immersion. When you reduce noise, you may initially feel less productive. Fewer updates, fewer conversations, less visible activity. But underneath that surface, something shifts. Work deepens, attention stabilizes, effort becomes more efficient, not because you rush, but because you are no longer dividing yourself. Silence simplifies choices. Do the work or do not. There is no middle ground where you can talk your way into feeling accomplished. This simplicity is uncomfortable, but clean. And clean environments tend to produce better results. Over time, silence changes your relationship with progress. You stop measuring effort by how it looks and start measuring it by what it produces. You trust process over presentation. The noise problem fades, not because the world gets quieter, but because you stop letting it set the rhythm of your work. You choose a different pace, a quieter one where action speaks first. Why we feel the need to announce everything. There is a moment before action where words feel especially tempting. The idea is still clean, the outcome still hopeful. Nothing has resisted us yet. This is often when the urge to announce appears. You might notice it as a casual mention, a small update, a message sent without much thought. It feels harmless, even practical. After all, sharing plans can create accountability. It can invite support. It can make the work feel real. But there is another layer beneath that explanation. Announcing something often serves an emotional purpose before it serves a practical one. It stabilizes identity. It reassures us that we are still moving forward, even if the movement has not yet begun. Saying what you are about to do can momentarily satisfy the need for progress. The brain registers intention as partial completion. A small reward is released. Relief arrives early. This early relief is subtle, but powerful. It reduces the tension that would have pushed you into action. The pressure eases. The urgency softens. What felt important a moment ago now feels comfortably distant. Silence would have held that tension in place. Words dissolve it. The need to announce is often misunderstood as confidence. In reality, it frequently comes from uncertainty. When you are unsure whether something will work, sharing it spreads the emotional weight. If it fails, at least others knew you tried. This is not weakness. It is human. We are social creatures. Our sense of direction has always been shaped by the group. Long before productivity systems or personal goals existed, survival depended on visibility and approval. Being seen mattered. That instinct did not disappear. It adapted. Now, instead of signaling physical effort, we signal intention. We show that we are planning, thinking, aiming. It reassures the group, and it reassures ourselves. But modern environments amplify this instinct beyond its usefulness. Platforms reward expression more than execution, visibility more than follow-through, reaction more than completion. In that context, announcing becomes the default. Silence feels suspicious. If you are not sharing, people assume nothing is happening. And slowly, without much resistance, we begin to believe that too. There is also a fear of invisibility tied to this behavior. Not being seen can feel like not existing. Announcements create presence. They leave traces. Proof that you are still engaged, still relevant. Action, on the other hand, is quiet until it finishes. And finishing takes time. Time without recognition can feel heavy. Announcing breaks that waiting period. It allows you to collect validation upfront. Encouragement arrives early. Questions arrive. Interest is shown. All of this feels energizing. It feels like support. And sometimes it is. But there is a difference between support that fuels action and attention that replaces it. Attention is stimulating. Support is stabilizing. One excites, the other sustains. Announcements often bring the first, not the second. There is also the issue of identity maintenance. When you tell people what you are working on, you are not only sharing a task, you are reinforcing a story about who you are. You become the person who is starting something, planning something, improving something. That identity can feel satisfying in itself. So satisfying that the actual work becomes secondary. Silence threatens this identity. Without words, there is no story to maintain, only effort. This is why silence can feel like a loss. It removes a layer of meaning that words provided. You are no longer the person who talks about doing something. You are simply someone who is doing it. And that shift can feel oddly empty at first. Another reason we announce is to create pressure. External expectations can push us when internal motivation feels unstable. Saying something out loud makes it harder to walk away. This strategy can work in certain situations, but it carries a cost. Pressure changes the relationship with the work. The task becomes something to perform rather than something to build. Fear of disappointing others enters the process. The focus shifts from quality to completion. Silence avoids this pressure, but it also removes the excuse. You can no longer blame an audience if the work feels heavy. There is no one to impress or disappoint. Only the work remains. This directness can feel uncomfortable, but it also clarifies intention. You find out quickly whether you actually care about the task or just about being seen caring. Announcements can also be a way to manage anxiety. Talking creates a sense of control. It organizes thoughts. It makes the unknown feel manageable. But anxiety is not resolved by explanation alone. It is resolved by engagement, by spending time with the thing itself. Silence forces that engagement. In quiet, doubts have space to surface fully. Without distraction, you feel the edges of your uncertainty. This can feel unsettling, but it is also informative. You begin to see which concerns are real and which are simply noise, which questions require action and which dissolve once you start. Announcements delay this discovery. They keep you in the abstract, in the safety of ideas rather than the friction of reality. There is also a cultural layer here. We live in a time that celebrates expression. Sharing is framed as courage. Silence is often framed as withdrawal. But silence is not absence. It is focus. Choosing not to announce is not about hiding. It is about protecting the early stages of effort, about allowing something to exist without explanation. Not everything benefits from exposure. Some things grow better in the dark. This does not mean you should never speak about your work. It means timing matters. Early on, silence preserves momentum. It keeps energy directed inward. Later, when the work has structure, sharing becomes grounding rather than draining. The problem arises when sharing happens too soon and too often, when every thought is externalized before it has a chance to settle. In those moments, talking becomes a substitute for trust. Trust in the process, trust in yourself. Silence requires that trust. It asks you to believe that effort matters even when no one sees it, that progress exists even when it is invisible. This belief is quiet. It does not announce itself, but it changes behavior. When you stop feeling the need to announce everything, you move differently. You begin without ceremony. You continue without commentary. You finish without explanation. And when you do speak, it is not to declare intention, but to share reality. That difference is subtle, but it changes everything. Silence as a working state. Silence is often misunderstood as the absence of activity. Nothing happening, no movement, no urgency. But when it comes to real work, silence is not empty. It is structured. A working silence has a texture to it. It feels contained, focused, slightly narrow. The world does not disappear, but it moves to the edges. Notifications lose their sharpness. Thoughts slow down enough to be useful. This kind of silence does not happen by accident. It is chosen. Sometimes deliberately, sometimes out of quiet exhaustion with noise. At first, it can feel unnatural. Without constant input, the mind looks for stimulation. It reaches for commentary. It wants to narrate what it is doing, as if reassurance is required for every step. But slowly, if the silence holds, something shifts. The work begins to lead. Instead of thinking about what you are doing, you find yourself inside it. Attention no longer jumps ahead to outcomes or sideways to reactions. It stays close to the task, not rigidly, gently. This is where effort becomes efficient. Silence as a working state does not mean isolation. It means containment, a boundary around attention, a temporary agreement with yourself to stay here with this for now. Inside that boundary, progress becomes quieter but deeper. You may notice that problems look different in silence. Without the pressure to explain or justify, solutions emerge more slowly but more accurately. You see nuances you would have missed while multitasking. You notice small errors before they grow large. Noise encourages speed. Silence encourages precision. There is a reason many people associate silence with seriousness. It removes the padding. Without distraction, you are face to face with the quality of your effort. This can feel confronting. In silence, there is no audience to impress, no commentary to hide behind. The work either moves or it does not. This clarity is uncomfortable at first, but it is also grounding. It replaces anxiety with information. Silence reveals whether resistance is mental or structural, whether the task is unclear or simply uncomfortable, whether you need to adjust approach or just stay longer. Noise blurs these distinctions. Silence sharpens them. There is also a physical component to this state. Breathing slows. Movements become more deliberate. You are less reactive, more responsive. The body settles into rhythm. This rhythm matters more than motivation. Motivation is unpredictable. Rhythm is dependable. Silence helps establish that rhythm. It creates continuity. One session leads naturally into the next because nothing interrupts the thread. When noise is constant, each return to work feels like starting over. You must rebuild context, re-enter focus, remember why you began. Silence preserves continuity. It keeps the thread unbroken. Over time, this state becomes familiar. You begin to recognize the moment when silence shifts from awkward to supportive, when it stops feeling like deprivation and starts feeling like relief. That relief is subtle. It shows up as steadiness rather than excitement. You are not energized. You are anchored. Silence also reduces emotional fluctuation. Without external feedback, mood stabilizes. Praise does not inflate effort. Criticism does not deflate it. You work at a more even level. This consistency allows for longer stretches of focus without burnout. In this way, silence is protective. It shields the nervous system from constant evaluation. It creates a small space where effort is not judged, only applied. This is especially important in early stages of any meaningful work. Before skills are refined, before confidence is earned, silence gives permission to be unfinished. When you work quietly, mistakes feel less dramatic. They are private, correctable, part of the process rather than a public failure. This encourages experimentation. You try things you might avoid if others were watching. You take small risks without worrying about how they will be interpreted. Noise discourages this. It invites caution. Performance. Safe choices. Silence invites honesty. Another aspect of silence as a working state is time perception. Hours feel different. They stretch and compress in unexpected ways. You look up and realize more has passed than you thought, or less. This altered sense of time is a sign of deep engagement. You are no longer tracking progress through external markers. You are immersed. Immersion is not forceful. It cannot be commanded. It arrives when conditions are right. Silence is one of those conditions. This does not mean you must eliminate all sound. Silence here is not about decibels. It is about mental quiet. You can be in a cafe and still be silent in this way. You can be in a busy house and still enter this state. What matters is not the environment, but the agreement you make with your attention. When you stop feeding it constant novelty, it settles. There is also a trust element involved. Silence asks you to trust that work does not need constant monitoring, that you do not need to check in, update, or confirm progress at every step. You let the process run. This trust builds confidence over time, not the loud kind that announces itself, but the quiet kind that knows it can return to work again tomorrow. Silence makes work repeatable. You begin to rely less on mood and more on habit, less on inspiration and more on presence. This shift is subtle but transformative. Work done in silence accumulates, it stacks quietly. Day after day, small increments add up without drawing attention to themselves. One day, you notice the result, not because you announced it, but because it exists. This is the quiet power of silence as a working state. It removes friction, it simplifies effort, it allows progress to grow without interference. You are not fighting distraction. You are no longer negotiating with it. You have stepped out of the conversation entirely. What remains is the work, and your willingness to stay with it. The comfort of talking versus the discomfort of doing talking is soft. It bends easily. It adjusts to mood, energy, and audience. Doing does not. This difference matters more than we usually admit. Talking allows movement without resistance. You can explain an idea without testing it. You can describe progress without meeting its weight. You can stay close to action without stepping into it. Doing, by contrast, meets friction immediately. Materials push back. Time stretches. Attention wavers. The task refuses to cooperate simply because you want it to. This is why talking feels comforting. It offers a sense of control. You choose the words. You shape the narrative. You decide when to stop. There is very little cost to changing direction mid-sentence. Doing removes that flexibility. Once you begin, the task has its own demands. You must respond rather than direct. You must adapt rather than narrate. That shift is uncomfortable. Most people do not avoid doing because they are incapable. They avoid it because the first moments of real effort feel clumsy, slow, inelegant. Talking hides that awkward phase. Doing exposes it. In conversation, you sound competent immediately. You can describe the end result as if it already exists. You can speak with confidence before earning it. In action, confidence arrives later, often much later. The early stages of doing rarely feel good. You make small mistakes. You realize what you do not know. The task resists your expectations. This is where many people retreat back into talking. They return to planning, to explaining, to refining the idea in words rather than refining the work itself. Not because the idea needs refinement, but because the discomfort of doing has surfaced. Talking smooths that discomfort. It wraps it in intention. It reframes struggle as preparation. Sometimes preparation is necessary. Often, it becomes a hiding place. There is also a social element to this comfort. Talking invites empathy. Others respond. They encourage. They nod. They relate. Doing is lonely at first. When you are working quietly, there is no immediate feedback, no reassurance that you are on the right track, no shared laughter to soften frustration. The work sits there, unchanged, waiting for you to meet it again. This loneliness can feel heavy, not dramatic, but dull, a low-level discomfort that whispers that you could be doing something easier instead. Talking offers relief from that dullness. It reintroduces stimulation, connection, movement, but it also postpones resolution. There is a point in every meaningful effort where words stop helping, where explanation reaches its limit. Beyond that point, only action can answer the questions that matter. How long will this take? What will actually work? Where are the real obstacles? These answers live inside the work, not around it. Talking keeps you near the surface. Doing pulls you under. The mind often resists this descent. It prefers clarity, structure, predictability. Doing offers none of these at first. Instead, it offers uncertainty. You do not yet know if your approach is correct. You cannot see the full path. You must proceed without guarantees. This is the core discomfort. Talking creates the illusion of certainty. Doing confronts you with its absence. And yet, certainty only emerges through doing, not before it. This creates a paradox. You want clarity before you begin, but clarity only arrives after you begin. Talking promises clarity. Doing delivers it. But the delivery takes time. In that waiting period, discomfort grows. The work feels heavier than expected. Progress feels slower than imagined. Talking allows you to escape that sensation temporarily. You can reset emotionally without changing anything structurally. This escape is seductive. It feels productive without requiring endurance. But over time, it creates a subtle imbalance. You become fluent in intention, but inexperienced in execution, comfortable with plans, unfamiliar with follow-through. This imbalance is not obvious at first. It hides behind busyness, behind communication, behind the appearance of engagement. Only later does it surface, often as frustration, a sense of being capable but unfulfilled, active but stalled. The discomfort of doing is different. It is sharper but cleaner. When you do, you know where you stand. You feel the resistance directly. You see what works and what does not. This clarity can sting, but it also guides. Discomfort in doing is information. It tells you where to adjust, where to slow down, where to push through. Discomfort in talking is diffuse. It spreads. It never quite resolves. It keeps you circling the same ideas without landing anywhere. There is also an emotional honesty in doing that talking avoids. When you work, you meet your limits. Not imagined limits, but real ones. You discover how long you can concentrate, how patient you are with repetition, how you respond to setbacks. These discoveries are not flattering. They rarely align with the story you tell about yourself. Talking protects that story. Doing revises it. This revision can feel like loss. You must let go of certain self-images, certain expectations, but what replaces them is grounded confidence. Confidence based on experience rather than projection. The comfort of talking is immediate. The comfort of doing arrives later, but it lasts longer. It shows up as trust. Trust that you can begin even when conditions are imperfect. Trust that effort accumulates even when progress is slow. This trust is built session by session, quietly. Over time, the discomfort of doing changes character. It becomes familiar, less threatening. You recognize its signals. You learn the difference between productive struggle and unnecessary friction. You stop interpreting every difficulty as failure. Talking never teaches this. It keeps difficulty abstract. Doing makes it specific. There is also a shift in self-respect that comes from choosing doing over talking. Not the loud kind that seeks recognition, but the quiet kind that notices consistency. You begin to take yourself seriously, not because others do, but because you have evidence. This evidence is private. It does not need to be announced. And because it is private, it is harder to shake. The comfort of talking will always be there. Words will always be easier than work. The question is not whether talking has value. It does. The question is whether it is serving the work or replacing it. When talking supports doing, it clarifies, it aligns, it communicates results. When talking replaces doing, it soothes without solving. Learning to tolerate the discomfort of doing is not about discipline in the harsh sense. It is about familiarity, about staying long enough for the work to stop feeling foreign. Once it does, something surprising happens. Silence becomes comfortable, effort becomes normal, and talking returns to its proper place as something that follows action, not something that stands in for it. Quiet people who move faster than they look. There is a certain kind of progress that does not announce itself. No updates, no commentary, no visible urgency. From the outside, it can look like nothing is happening, and then suddenly, something appears. Finished, functional, real. These are the people who often seem to move faster than they look. Not because they rush, but because they are not dividing their energy. They are not spending time explaining what they are doing. They are not narrating each step. They are not managing impressions in parallel with effort. Their attention stays where it is needed. Quiet movement has a different rhythm. It does not surge forward in bursts. It advances steadily, almost imperceptibly. Because of this, it is easy to underestimate. In a culture that associates speed with visibility, quiet work feels slow. There are no signals to track, no milestones shared, no public countdowns. But underneath that calm surface, continuity is doing its work. Each session begins where the last one ended. There is no need to reorient or re-explain. Context remains intact. This continuity is an advantage that compounds. When others are restarting, quiet workers are continuing. This is one reason they appear to move faster. They lose less time to transition, less time to distraction, less time to emotional recovery after interruptions. They are not immune to resistance. They simply meet it without commentary. Resistance, when faced quietly, loses some of its power. It thrives on drama, on amplification, on attention. Silence starves it. Another reason quiet people move quickly is that they make fewer decisions about visibility. Every time you choose what to share, how to phrase it, and when to post it, you are making decisions that do not advance the work itself. These decisions may feel small, but they accumulate. Quiet workers skip them. They conserve cognitive energy. That energy goes into solving actual problems rather than packaging effort for display. This does not mean they are indifferent to outcome. In fact, the opposite is often true. They care deeply about the result. They simply prefer to invest in substance before presentation. This preference changes behavior. They test ideas privately. They discard what does not work without ceremony. They refine without defending. Because no one is watching, there is no need to justify missteps. Adjustments happen quickly. Public work often slows at these points. Explanations are required. Context must be provided. Opinions are invited. Quiet work moves on. There is also a patience involved in this way of working. Without external validation, progress must be self-supported. This builds internal reference points. Instead of asking, "How does this look?" the question becomes, "Does this function?" This shift accelerates learning. Feedback is immediate and relevant. The work either improves or it does not. There is no delay caused by interpretation. Quiet people also tend to break work into smaller, manageable units. Not because they are optimizing productivity, but because their attention stays close to the task. They notice what the next step actually is. Not the entire journey, just the next piece. This keeps momentum light. When work is loud, it often becomes inflated. Goals are framed broadly. Timelines are stretched. Expectations rise. Quiet work stays grounded. It deals with what is in front of it. This groundedness reduces overwhelm, and reduced overwhelm leads to faster movement. Another subtle advantage is emotional regulation. Quiet workers experience fewer emotional spikes related to feedback. There is less anticipation, less comparison, less reaction. Emotional energy stays stable. Stability allows for consistency, and consistency over time outpaces intensity. This is difficult to see from the outside. We are drawn to intensity. It looks like commitment. Consistency looks ordinary, but ordinary effort repeated daily produces extraordinary results. Quiet people also tend to finish more things, not because they are more disciplined, but because they are less distracted by alternatives. When you are not constantly exposed to others' reactions, you are less likely to second-guess direction. You commit and continue. Public visibility increases options. Every response opens a new path. Every suggestion invites a pivot. Quiet reduces options. It simplifies. This simplicity speeds completion. There is also a humility in quiet movement. Without an audience, ego has less to work with. There is no performance to maintain. This allows for realistic pacing. Breaks are taken when needed. Work resumes without guilt or explanation. Energy is managed, not spent. This management is often mistaken for slowness. In reality, it prevents burnout, and burnout is one of the biggest sources of lost time. Quiet workers rarely disappear dramatically. They rarely announce exhaustion. They adjust quietly and keep going. From the outside, this can look like effortless progress. In truth, it is careful progress. Another factor is trust. Quiet people trust process more than perception. They are willing to let results arrive later. This patience allows them to stay with difficult phases longer. They do not rush to show something before it is ready. As a result, fewer revisions are needed later, fewer corrections, less backtracking. Time saved here is significant. It is also worth noting that quiet does not mean invisible forever. The difference lies in timing. Quiet people choose when to be seen. They speak when there is something to show, not something to promise. This makes their appearance feel sudden, even when the work behind it was gradual. Observers often say they came out of nowhere. In reality, they were simply not announcing their location. This misperception reinforces the idea that they are faster, that they somehow skipped steps. They did not skip. They stayed. They stayed with the work while others were talking about the work. This staying is not glamorous. It does not feel impressive in the moment. It often feels repetitive, but repetition is efficient. Each return to the task deepens familiarity. Decisions take less time, movements become smoother. Speed emerges naturally without being chased. Quiet people do not hurry. They remove friction. They remove unnecessary communication, unnecessary comparison, unnecessary validation. What remains is a direct line between effort and outcome. This line shortens with time. Eventually, their pace surprises others. But it rarely surprises them. They have been moving all along, just quietly. Focus without performance. There is a version of focus that is meant to be seen. It looks disciplined, intentional, impressive. And there is another version that does not care how it looks at all. This second kind is quieter, less polished, often invisible. It is focus without performance. When focus becomes something to display, it changes shape. Attention splits. Part of you stays with the task. Another part watches yourself working. Am I focused enough? Does this look productive? Would this be respected if someone saw it? These questions do not sound disruptive, but they pull attention outward. They turn effort into a form of self-observation. Performance enters quietly. You are no longer just working. You are managing how the work might be perceived. This management consumes energy. It introduces friction. It shortens the time you can stay with a task before needing relief. Focus without performance removes that layer. It allows attention to settle fully into the work, without commentary, without self-evaluation, without imagined spectators. In this state, you are not trying to appear focused. You simply are. This difference is subtle, but it changes everything. Performance focus is often driven by good intentions. You want to be disciplined. You want to respect your time. You want to do things properly. But when discipline turns into display, it loses effectiveness. You begin to choose tasks that look serious over tasks that actually matter. You optimize for appearance rather than impact. Silence disrupts this pattern. Without an audience, there is no reason to perform focus. There is only the question of whether the work is moving. This simplifies decision-making. You stop asking how focused you should be and start noticing whether you are engaged. Engagement is not rigid. It allows for wandering within boundaries. It tolerates pauses. It accepts uneven pacing. Performance focus does not allow this. It demands consistency. It demands intensity. That demand is exhausting. Focus without performance is sustainable. It adapts to energy rather than fighting it. This adaptability keeps work alive over long periods. It prevents the burnout that comes from trying to look disciplined every day. There is also an honesty to this form of focus. You do not pretend to be absorbed when you are not. You notice distraction without judgment and return when ready. There is no need to prove anything. This honesty reduces internal resistance. When you stop forcing focus to perform, attention becomes more cooperative. It follows curiosity. It responds to clarity. It stays longer when the task is well defined. Noise interferes with this cooperation. It constantly reminds you that focus is visible, that it can be evaluated. Silence removes evaluation. Without evaluation, focus becomes private, and private focus is forgiving. You can work in fragments, you can shift pace, you can explore without committing to results immediately. This freedom increases creativity. It also improves problem solving. When you are not performing focus, you are less afraid of dead ends. You explore them briefly, learn what you need, and move on. Performance focus avoids dead ends. It prefers safe linear paths that look efficient. Ironically, this caution often slows progress. Focus without performance allows inefficiency in the short term for efficiency in the long term. It gives you permission to think badly at first, to try incomplete ideas, to sit with uncertainty. This permission is essential for depth. Depth cannot be rushed. It cannot be staged. It requires staying with questions that do not resolve quickly. Performance focus struggles here. It needs visible movement. It needs signs of progress. Silence supports depth. It does not demand proof. There is also a psychological relief in letting go of performance. When you are no longer trying to appear focused, you stop monitoring yourself constantly. That monitoring is tiring. It keeps the nervous system slightly alert, slightly tense. Focus without performance relaxes this tension. Relaxation does not reduce productivity. It often increases it. A relaxed mind can stay with complexity longer. It makes fewer reactive decisions. You become more patient with the work. This patience shows up as steadiness rather than intensity. Steadiness outlasts intensity. Another aspect of focus without performance is reduced comparison. When you are not trying to demonstrate focus, you are less concerned with how others work. You stop measuring your effort against external standards. You work according to what the task requires, not what productivity culture suggests. This alignment improves results. Each task has its own rhythm. Forcing a universal pace disrupts that rhythm. Quiet focus listens to the task. It adjusts naturally. This listening is only possible when performance drops away. When the mind is not busy maintaining an image, focus becomes responsive rather than prescriptive. There is also a maturity in this shift. You accept that not every session will look impressive. Some days will be slow, some will be uneven. You stop interpreting this as failure. Performance focus treats slow days as problems to fix. Focus without performance treats them as part of the process. This acceptance reduces anxiety, and reduced anxiety improves concentration. It is a simple loop: less performance, more presence, better focus. Over time, this way of working builds trust. Trust in your ability to return to the work without rituals or pressure. You no longer need to create the appearance of discipline. Discipline emerges quietly through repetition. You sit down, you begin, you continue until it makes sense to stop. No one needs to see it. This is what makes focus without performance powerful. It is self-contained. It does not depend on motivation, validation, or recognition. It depends only on your willingness to be with the work as it is. And that willingness, practiced quietly, becomes reliable. Eventually, others may notice the results. They may comment on your consistency, your output, your calm. But by then, performance no longer matters. The focus has already done its work. Momentum grows best in private. Momentum is often imagined as something loud, visible, obvious. We picture bursts of activity, rapid progress, clear signals that things are moving forward. But real momentum is quieter than that. It grows slowly, almost invisibly, in spaces where attention is protected and expectations are low. Private momentum does not announce its arrival. You feel it before you see it. A slight ease in beginning, a smoother transition into the work. Less hesitation at the start. These are small signs, easy to miss. Public momentum looks different. It relies on markers, deadlines, updates, external pressure. Private momentum relies on continuity. When you work without an audience, the work becomes less fragile. Early progress is easily disrupted by attention. Opinions arrive too soon. Reactions shape direction before the structure has formed. Privacy shields this stage. It allows ideas to be incomplete without being judged. It allows effort to be inconsistent without being criticized. This protection matters more than motivation. Motivation is unstable. Privacy is stabilizing. In private, you can move at the pace the work requires, not the pace others expect. Some tasks need repetition. Some need long pauses. Some need false starts. Public environments struggle with this variability. They prefer steady narratives, clear arcs, predictable progress. Private work does not need to explain itself. This freedom reduces friction, and reduced friction is what creates momentum. Momentum is not speed, it is ease. Ease of starting, ease of continuing, ease of returning after a break. These forms of ease are built through familiarity, and familiarity requires time spent with the work. Privacy allows that time to accumulate without interruption. When you announce work early, you invite evaluation. Even supportive evaluation creates weight. You begin to carry not just the task, but expectations about it. That weight slows momentum. In private, the task stands alone. You can adjust direction without explanation. You can pause without justification. This flexibility keeps movement fluid. Another reason momentum grows best in private is emotional regulation. Without external reactions, emotional highs and lows flatten. You are less excited when things go well, less discouraged when they do not. This steadiness prevents stalls. Public momentum often surges and collapses, a burst of energy followed by exhaustion. Enthusiasm fades once attention moves elsewhere. Private momentum is quieter, but it endures. It shows up as a habit rather than a mood. You begin to trust that you can sit down and work without needing a surge of inspiration. This trust removes hesitation. Hesitation is one of the biggest barriers to momentum, not the difficulty of the work, but the delay before beginning. Privacy shortens that delay. When no one is watching, there is no need to prepare, no need to be ready. You can begin imperfectly. Imperfect beginnings build momentum faster than perfect plans. There is also less comparison in private. Comparison drains momentum by redirecting attention outward. You start asking how your progress measures up, whether you are ahead or behind, whether your approach is valid. These questions do not move the work forward. In private, there is nothing to compare against, only the task and your current capacity. This simplicity keeps momentum intact. Another subtle factor is recovery. Momentum depends on rest as much as effort. Public work makes rest feel visible. It invites interpretation. Private work allows quiet recovery. You step away without signaling a pause. You return without announcing a restart. This reduces the emotional cost of stopping. Stopping is not a failure, it is part of rhythm. Public environments often punish pauses. Silence is interpreted as loss of interest. Gaps are questioned. Private momentum tolerates gaps. It resumes where it left off. This tolerance prevents abandonment. Many projects fail not because of lack of ability, but because restarting feels too heavy, too visible, too awkward. Privacy removes that weight. You simply return. Over time, this creates a stable loop. Work, rest, return. Without drama, momentum becomes self-sustaining. Another advantage of private momentum is focus preservation. Without frequent sharing, context remains intact. You remember where you were, what you were thinking. Public sharing fragments context. You step out to explain, then step back in. Each transition costs time and energy. Private work minimizes transitions. You stay close to the work. You carry it with you. Ideas continue forming even when you are not actively working. This continuity accelerates progress in ways that are difficult to measure. You may notice insights arriving unexpectedly, solutions forming while you are doing something else. This is a sign of deep engagement. Deep engagement requires privacy. There is also a psychological safety in private momentum. You are allowed to fail quietly, to experiment without consequence. This encourages exploration. Exploration leads to better solutions. Public momentum discourages exploration. It favors safe moves, predictable outcomes. Safe moves rarely create meaningful momentum. Private work tolerates messiness, and messiness is often where real movement begins. Over time, private momentum changes your relationship with progress. You stop looking for signals that things are working. You feel it internally. This internal sense is subtle. It is not excitement, it is readiness. You sit down and the work opens. This readiness is the result of many quiet sessions, none of which felt dramatic. Public momentum seeks validation. Private momentum builds capacity. Capacity is quieter, but far more reliable. When results finally appear, they may seem sudden to others, but to you, they feel inevitable. Not because you predicted them, but because you have been moving steadily all along. Momentum did not arrive in a burst. It grew, quietly, where no one could interrupt it, in private. When silence becomes confidence. Confidence is often mistaken for volume, for certainty expressed out loud, for the ability to explain yourself quickly and convincingly. But there is another kind of confidence that arrives quietly. It does not announce itself. It does not rush to be understood. It does not argue for its own legitimacy. It simply continues. This confidence is built in silence. At first, silence feels like uncertainty. Without feedback, you wonder whether you are doing enough, whether you are doing the right thing, whether your effort is invisible because it is ineffective. These questions are uncomfortable. They test patience. But over time, something shifts. You begin to notice patterns. You see that returning to the work consistently produces results, even if they are small. You feel the difference between days when you work and days when you do not. This feedback is internal, subtle, but reliable. As this internal feedback grows stronger, the need for external confirmation weakens. You stop checking whether your effort is valid. You start trusting the process because you have experienced it. This trust is the beginning of quiet confidence. It is not rooted in belief. It is rooted in familiarity. You have seen yourself begin when you did not feel ready. You have seen yourself continue when it was uncomfortable. You have seen yourself finish things quietly. These experiences accumulate. They form a private record. Unlike public validation, this record does not fluctuate. It is not influenced by mood or opinion. It does not disappear when attention moves elsewhere. It stays. It stays. Silence also removes the pressure to perform certainty. You do not have to sound confident. You do not have to explain why something will work. You allow yourself to not know. Paradoxically, this openness strengthens confidence. When you are not pretending to be certain, you are more adaptable. You respond to reality rather than defending a position. This responsiveness is a form of confidence. It shows trust in your ability to adjust. Loud confidence often resists change. Quiet confidence absorbs it. There is also a calm that develops in silence. Without constant evaluation, emotional spikes flatten. Success does not inflate you. Difficulty does not derail you. You develop a steadier relationship with effort. This steadiness is often mistaken for indifference, but it is actually commitment without drama. Drama requires an audience. Silence dissolves it. As drama fades, focus deepens. And as focus deepens, competence grows. Competence is one of the strongest sources of confidence. Not theoretical competence, but practiced competence. You know what you can do because you have done it repeatedly. Silence allows this repetition to happen without interference. It also reduces comparison. When you are not sharing progress, you are less exposed to others' timelines. You stop measuring yourself against external standards. You measure against your own consistency. This shift is grounding. Comparison creates fragile confidence. It depends on positioning. Someone else's success can undermine it instantly. Quiet confidence is independent. It does not rise or fall based on what others are doing. It is self-contained. Another way silence builds confidence is by normalizing difficulty. When struggle is private, it feels less like failure and more like part of the process. You stop interpreting resistance as a sign that something is wrong. This interpretation matters. If every obstacle feels like a public test, confidence erodes quickly. If obstacles are simply encountered and addressed, confidence grows. Silence reframes struggle as information. This reframing reduces fear, and reduced fear improves performance. You become more willing to start difficult tasks. You know that discomfort does not mean you are incapable. This knowledge is quiet but powerful. Over time, you also notice that you speak differently. Not because you are trying to sound confident, but because you no longer need to fill space. You answer when asked. You explain when useful. You remain silent when there is nothing to add. This restraint is not insecurity. It is selectivity. You trust that your presence does not depend on constant expression. This trust is rare in a world that rewards visibility. Silence teaches you that you can exist without broadcasting, that your work has value even when it is unseen. This realization is stabilizing. You begin to carry yourself differently, not heavier, lighter. You do not rush to prove competence. You allow it to show when it is ready. This patience is another form of confidence. There is also a boundary that develops. When you work quietly, you become less reactive to external demands. You choose where to invest energy. This choice reinforces confidence. You are no longer pulled in every direction. Your effort has shape. Silence also teaches you to listen, not just to others, but to the work itself. You notice when something feels forced, when you need rest, when direction needs adjusting. This listening improves judgment. Good judgment builds confidence. You trust your decisions because they are informed by experience rather than noise. As silence continues, confidence becomes less about feeling good and more about feeling capable. You may still doubt outcomes. You may still feel uncertainty, but you do not doubt your ability to show up and work through it. This is the core of quiet confidence. It is not loud enough to announce itself. It does not need to. It lives in the simple act of beginning again without explanation. When silence becomes confidence, you stop seeking permission. You stop waiting for readiness. You work, and that work, done quietly over time, becomes its own assurance. The energy you save by explaining less. Explaining takes more energy than it seems. Not the obvious kind, the hidden kind. The kind spent choosing words, anticipating reactions, clarifying intentions, and smoothing misunderstandings before they exist. Each explanation pulls attention away from the work itself, briefly perhaps, but repeatedly. These small withdrawals add up. When you explain what you are doing, you are not only describing a task, you are managing meaning. You are shaping how the work should be understood. This management is subtle but demanding. You must decide what matters enough to mention, what details to include, what tone to use, how confident to sound. None of this moves the work forward. It may support relationships, it may prevent confusion, it may be necessary at certain stages. But when explanation becomes habitual, it drains energy quietly. Silence preserves that energy. When you explain less, you simplify. You remove an entire layer of cognitive effort. The mind stays closer to the task. This closeness improves efficiency. You may notice this for as reduced fatigue. The day ends and you are tired, but not scattered. Focus has been spent on one thing rather than diluted across many. This matters. Energy is finite. How you spend it determines how far you can go. Explaining often feels helpful because it creates closure. You say something and the topic feels handled, but that closure is symbolic. The task remains unchanged. Silence keeps the task open. It does not offer the relief of completion through words. This can feel uncomfortable, but it also keeps energy aligned with action. Another cost of explanation is emotional. When you explain, you open the door to interpretation. Even neutral responses can affect motivation. A question can introduce doubt. A suggestion can create pressure. A lack of response can feel like indifference. Each reaction requires processing. When you explain less, you protect emotional energy. You reduce the number of inputs that require response. This protection stabilizes effort. You stop recalibrating based on external feedback. You continue based on internal direction. This continuity saves energy over time. There is also a strategic advantage to explaining less. When you speak only when necessary, your words carry more weight. They are not part of constant noise. They are purposeful. This selectivity reduces the need for clarification. People listen more carefully when you do speak. But even if no one is listening, the benefit remains. You have conserved attention. Explaining also interrupts flow. Even brief explanations break immersion. You step out of the work, translate it into language, and then step back in. This translation is costly. It takes time to re-enter focus. The mind must reconstruct context. Momentum slows. Silence avoids this interruption. You stay with the work. The thread remains unbroken. Over long periods, this difference is significant. Hours accumulate, days build, progress compounds. Another aspect is decision fatigue. Every explanation involves choices: what to say, what to omit, how to phrase. Reducing explanations reduces decisions. Fewer decisions mean more clarity. More clarity means faster action. This simplicity is often underestimated. Explaining also creates expectations. Once you describe a plan, it becomes something to live up to. Deviating requires justification. Silence keeps plans flexible. You can adjust without feeling inconsistent. Flexibility saves energy that would otherwise be spent defending changes. There is also less mental rehearsal. When you explain frequently, you rehearse conversations internally. You anticipate questions, you prepare answers. These rehearsals occupy mental space. Silence frees that space. You think less about what you will say and more about what you will do. This shift is subtle, but it changes focus from presentation to progress. Another hidden cost of explanation is self-monitoring. When you talk about your work, you begin to watch yourself through others' eyes. This creates tension. You try to align behavior with what you have said. Silence removes this external mirror. You act based on the task, not the narrative. This alignment reduces internal conflict. Energy is no longer split between action and consistency. It all goes into the work. Over time, explaining less changes how you relate to effort. You stop needing to justify how you spend your time. You trust that your choices make sense even if no one else knows them. This trust reduces anxiety. Reduced anxiety frees energy. It becomes easier to start, easier to continue, easier to stop when needed. Another benefit is deeper concentration. When explanations are minimized, attention stays within a narrower range. You notice more details. You catch issues earlier. You refine more precisely. Precision saves energy in the long run. Fewer corrections are needed later. Explaining less also encourages action-first thinking. Instead of asking how to describe a plan, you ask what the next step is. This practical orientation moves work forward. Language follows action, not the other way around. This order matters. When explanation leads, it can become a substitute. When action leads, explanation becomes a summary. Summaries are shorter. They require less energy. There is also a sense of relief that comes from not having to explain. You are not accountable to constant updates. You work, rest, adjust, and return without commentary. This quiet autonomy is energizing. It gives you control over your attention, control over your pace. You choose when to speak. This choice reinforces boundaries. Boundaries preserve energy. As you explain less, you may notice an increase in patience. You are less rushed to conclude things verbally. You allow processes to unfold. This patience is not passive. It is active restraint. Restraint saves energy by preventing premature conclusions. Eventually, explaining less becomes natural. You do not feel the need to fill silence with updates. You let progress speak when it exists. And when it does, you will notice that you have more energy to finish what you started. because you did not spend it explaining along the way. Doing the work without needing approval. Approval is subtle. It rarely announces itself as a need. More often, it shows up as a quick check, a brief pause, a moment of wondering whether this makes sense to someone else. These moments seem harmless, but they redirect attention. Instead of staying with the work, you step outside it. You imagine how it will be received, whether it aligns with expectations, whether it will be recognized as valid. This shift changes the nature of effort. Work done for approval carries extra weight. Each decision must pass an invisible test. Each step is evaluated not only for effectiveness but for acceptability. This evaluation slows progress. When approval is not required, work moves more freely. Decisions are made based on what the task needs, not on how they will be judged. This freedom is quiet but powerful. At first, working without approval can feel exposed. Without external confirmation, you are left alone with your choices. Doubt surfaces more clearly. There is no reassurance to soften it. But this exposure is also clarifying. You begin to distinguish between real uncertainty and habitual checking. Real uncertainty asks, does this work? Habitual checking asks, will this be accepted? These are different questions. The first improves the work. The second manages perception. Silence favors the first. When you stop seeking approval, you stop performing alignment. You no longer shape effort to fit anticipated reactions. You shape it to fit reality. Reality responds faster. You see what functions and what does not. You adjust without delay. Approval-based work delays this feedback. You wait for reactions. You interpret signals. You hesitate. Hesitation breaks momentum. Another effect of needing approval is self-censorship. You avoid ideas that might be misunderstood. You choose safer options. This reduces experimentation. Without approval pressure, you are more willing to try approaches that feel right, even if they are unconventional. This willingness accelerates learning. Mistakes are made more quickly. Corrections follow. Progress continues. Approval seeking stretches this cycle. You wait, you ask, you reconsider. Time is lost. There is also emotional cost. Approval ties self-worth to external response. A positive reaction lifts you. A negative one deflates you. This volatility is exhausting. Working without approval stabilizes emotion. Your mood becomes less dependent on feedback. Stability supports consistency. Consistency supports results. This does not mean ignoring others completely. It means choosing when feedback is useful rather than constantly required. Timing matters. Early stages benefit from autonomy. Later stages benefit from input. Approval seeking reverses this. It invites judgment before structure exists. Silence protects early work. Another aspect is identity. When you work for approval, part of the work is about maintaining an image. You are not just building something, you are reinforcing a version of yourself. This dual task splits attention. Working without approval removes that split. You are free to revise, discard, and change direction without feeling inconsistent. This flexibility saves energy. It also builds resilience. You learn to trust your ability to navigate uncertainty without reassurance. This trust grows with practice. At first, it feels uncomfortable. You may notice the urge to check in, to explain, to confirm. Resisting this urge creates space. In that space, you encounter your own judgment. You learn how you evaluate your work. This internal evaluation becomes more refined over time. You develop standards based on experience, not opinion. These standards are quieter, but more reliable. Approval-based standards shift. They depend on who is watching. Internal standards remain stable. There is also a change in pace. Without approval checkpoints, work flows more continuously. You do not pause to wait for confirmation. This continuity shortens completion time. You finish more things. Finishing builds confidence. Confidence reduces the need for approval. This creates a reinforcing loop. Work leads to confidence. Confidence leads to independence. Independence leads to better work. Approval interrupts this loop. Another benefit of working without approval is reduced defensiveness. When feedback does arrive, you are less attached. You listen more openly. You adjust without feeling threatened. Approval-based work ties ego to outcome. Feedback feels personal. Autonomous work separates effort from identity. This separation improves collaboration when it is needed. You can invite input without feeling dependent on it. Silence strengthens this separation. It teaches you that work can exist without constant affirmation. Over time, you notice a shift in how you start tasks. You begin more quickly. There is less internal debate. You trust that clarity will emerge through doing. This trust reduces friction. You stop waiting to feel confident before acting. You act and allow confidence to follow. This order matters. Approval often postpones action until certainty appears. Certainty rarely appears without action. Silence reverses this. Action leads. Understanding follows. Another subtle change is self-respect. When you work without needing approval, you treat your time and attention as valuable. You do not spend them seeking permission. This self-respect is quiet. It does not announce itself, but it influences behavior. You choose tasks more carefully. You commit more fully. You disengage when something is not aligned. These choices are easier without the weight of others' expectations. Eventually, working without approval feels normal. You no longer experience it as isolation. It becomes autonomy. Autonomy does not mean detachment. It means grounded independence. You are connected to the work, not to the reaction. And that connection is what allows progress to continue, quietly, even when no one is watching. Quiet consistency over loud motivation. Motivation is loud by nature. It arrives with energy, with clarity, with a sense of urgency. It feels decisive, it feels convincing, and then it fades. This is not a failure of character. It is simply how motivation works. It responds to emotion, novelty, and expectation. When those elements change, motivation changes with them. Consistency behaves differently. Consistency does not announce itself. It does not rely on feeling ready. It does not need to be inspired. It shows up quietly, often without enthusiasm. This difference matters more than intensity ever will. Loud motivation creates movement that looks impressive at first. Big starts, long sessions, clear declarations, but loud beginnings often struggle with quiet middles. The middle is where most work lives. It is repetitive, uneventful, resistant to excitement. Motivation loses interest here. Consistency does not. Consistency is built on familiarity rather than emotion. You begin because it is time to begin. You continue because you began. This loop is not exciting. It is reliable. Reliability produces results. Quiet consistency is less visible than motivated bursts. There are no dramatic signals, no clear moments of transformation. Progress accumulates in small increments. From the outside, this can look like stagnation. From the inside, it feels like stability. Stability allows you to stay. Staying matters more than starting. Many people start well, few continue when novelty fades. Motivation supports starting. Consistency supports continuing. Silence strengthens consistency. Without constant stimulation, effort becomes ordinary. Ordinary effort is sustainable. When work is loud, it often becomes performative. You wait for the right mood, the right conditions, the right energy. Consistency removes these conditions. You work within whatever energy is available. Some days are sharp, some are dull, some are distracted. Consistency accommodates all of them. This accommodation reduces friction. You no longer argue with yourself about readiness. You begin with what you have. This acceptance prevents delays. Another aspect of quiet consistency is humility. You accept that progress is not always visible. You trust accumulation. This trust is difficult in a culture that celebrates breakthroughs. Breakthroughs are rare. Accumulation is common. Most meaningful outcomes are built, not discovered. Consistency builds. Motivation discovers and abandons. Silence helps you stay with the building. There is also a shift in expectations. Motivated work often sets high standards for each session. You expect noticeable progress. When that progress does not appear, disappointment follows. Consistency lowers expectations for individual sessions. You focus on presence rather than outcome. This reduces disappointment. Reduced disappointment preserves momentum. Quiet consistency also trains patience. You learn to tolerate slow movement. You stop rushing the process. Rushing introduces errors. Errors require correction. Correction costs time. Consistency reduces the need for correction by keeping effort measured. There is also less emotional investment per session. Motivated work carries emotional charge. When a session goes poorly, it feels personal. Consistent work is emotionally neutral. A difficult session is simply one of many. This neutrality protects confidence. Over time, quiet consistency reshapes identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who works when inspired and start seeing yourself as someone who works. This identity is stable. It does not depend on mood or circumstance. Motivation-based identity fluctuates. Some days you feel capable, some days you do not. Consistency-based identity holds. This stability supports long-term effort. Another benefit of quiet consistency is reduced burnout. Motivated bursts often push beyond sustainable limits. They feel good in the moment, but they extract a cost. Consistency respects limits. You pace yourself. Pacing keeps effort available tomorrow. Burnout interrupts progress more than lack of motivation ever will. Consistency avoids interruption. Silence also reduces comparison. Motivation thrives on contrast. You see others' energy and feel compelled to match it. Consistency ignores contrast. It works at its own pace. This independence reduces pressure. Pressure distorts effort. Quiet consistency is pressure resistant. There is also a clarity that emerges over time. Repeated engagement reveals patterns. You see what works and what does not. Motivated work does not stay long enough to learn these patterns. It jumps. Consistency stays. Staying builds understanding. Understanding improves efficiency. Efficiency saves time. The results of quiet consistency often surprise others. They did not see the work happening. They did not witness the accumulation. The outcome appears sudden. But to you, it feels earned. You remember the ordinary days, the quiet sessions, the moments when you showed up without enthusiasm. These moments matter. They are the structure beneath the surface. Quiet consistency does not need recognition. It does not require reinforcement. It is self-sustaining. Once established, it becomes part of how you move through the world. You work, you stop, you return. No ceremony, no declarations, just continuation. In the end, loud motivation may start the journey, but it is quiet consistency that finishes it. And finishing quietly is what changes things. Let results make the noise. There comes a point when words are no longer useful, not because they have failed, but because they have done their part. At this point, the work exists. It stands on its own. It does not need explanation to be understood. Results have a different kind of presence. They do not persuade. They do not promise. They simply appear. And when they do, they speak quietly but clearly. Letting results make the noise requires patience. It asks you to delay expression until something tangible exists, until effort has taken shape. This delay is uncomfortable in a world that rewards immediacy, where visibility often arrives before substance, where intention is treated as achievement. Choosing to wait feels like restraint, but restraint creates contrast. When you speak less along the way, the outcome carries more weight. It arrives without buildup, without framing, without defense. It is received as it is. This reception is cleaner. There is less interpretation, less expectation to manage. Results do not ask for approval. They invite response. This difference matters. When you let results speak, you step out of the conversation about effort and into the reality of outcome. The conversation changes tone. People respond to what exists, not what might exist. Feedback becomes grounded. Questions become practical. The emotional charge drops. You are no longer asking others to imagine value. You are offering something concrete. This concreteness is calming. It reduces anxiety on both sides. There is less speculation, less anticipation. The work has crossed a threshold. To reach this point quietly, you must resist the urge to narrate progress, to update others on each step, to share drafts before they are ready. This resistance is not about secrecy. It is about timing. Early expression dilutes impact. Late expression concentrates it. Silence allows effort to mature. It gives work time to become coherent, to resolve its internal questions. Many projects struggle not because they are flawed, but because they are exposed too early. Opinions arrive before structure exists. Direction shifts before understanding forms. Silence protects against this. It creates a private space where mistakes can be made without consequence, where revisions happen naturally, where clarity emerges through repetition rather than discussion. By the time results appear, they are steadier. They do not wobble under scrutiny. They do not require justification. They simply function. This functionality is persuasive. Another benefit of letting results make the noise is relief. You are no longer carrying the burden of explanation. You do not need to convince anyone that your effort mattered. The result demonstrates it. This relief frees attention. You stop rehearsing narratives. You stop anticipating reactions. You stop managing impressions. Energy returns to where it belongs. There is also a shift in self-perception. When you allow results to speak, you stop identifying with intention and start identifying with follow-through. This identity is quieter but stronger. You trust yourself more. Not because you believe in your potential, but because you have evidence of completion. Completion changes how you approach future work. You begin with less doubt, less urgency, less need to announce. You know that if you stay with the process, something will emerge. This knowledge is stabilizing. Letting results speak also changes how you listen. When you are not invested in defending a process, you can hear feedback more clearly. You are less attached to how things were done and more interested in how they work. This openness improves iteration. Results become starting points rather than conclusions. Another subtle change is timing. You learn when to share and when to wait. You become selective. You notice that not every thought needs expression. Not every effort needs witnesses. This selectivity preserves meaning. When you do speak, it is because there is something worth saying. Silence sharpens judgment. There is also dignity in letting results arrive quietly. No announcements, no build-up, just presence. This dignity is rare. It contrasts with constant broadcasting. It feels grounded. People sense this grounding. They may not comment on it directly, but they respond differently. With curiosity rather than expectation. With respect rather than evaluation. The work is allowed to stand. Letting results make the noise also reduces regret. You are less likely to feel that you spoke too soon, that you promised something you could not deliver. Words spoken after results carry less risk. They are anchored. This anchoring creates confidence. Not performative confidence, but practical confidence. You know where you stand. Over time, this approach simplifies life. You spend less time explaining, defending, and updating. You spend more time doing, adjusting, and finishing. The balance shifts. Noise fades. Substance grows. Eventually, you may notice that others begin to speak for you. They refer to what you have done rather than what you intend to do. This is not a goal to chase. It is a byproduct of quiet effort. When results exist, they circulate. They do not need amplification. They find their way. This does not mean recognition is guaranteed. Some results remain quiet. Some are noticed slowly. But even then, their value is real. They have shaped you. They have built capacity. They have created momentum. Whether or not others notice, something has changed. You are no longer waiting to begin. You are no longer preparing to act. You are acting. And that action, repeated quietly over time, has produced something solid. Letting results make the noise is not about withdrawing from the world. It is about reordering attention. You move first. You speak later. You allow effort to lead and language to follow. This order is calm. It is sustainable. It replaces urgency with steadiness. It replaces explanation with presence. In the end, the quiet path does not eliminate noise. It delays it. And when the noise finally arrives, it is no longer made of words. It is made of work.